Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at levels and curves. Let me just get this out to 1920 by 1080 and we'll begin. Now we'll go over a little bit of the theory of how curves work, and then eventually we're going to pop over into an image and we're going to play around with not only curves but also levels. So let's begin here. I've got the levels dialog window, the curves dialog window open here. If you're wondering how I got that going, I simply went into the layers panel, came down here and selected curves. And as you can see, you can also select levels from down there as well. So let's see what goes on here. Take a look at the graph, if you will, over here. I've got my grayscale going from black to white. This represents brightness values of the pixels. The one in the bottom left has got a value of 0, which means black, and that is that first bar there. And as we go up, the bars get brighter and brighter and brighter, and this has a value of 255, which means the white one here on the right. Now, as kind of a graphical demonstration, I could click on the little hand. When we get to our color image of the forest there, you'll see how this works, but it's pretty cool. As I go across here, you can see that little line, that circle, if you will, moving up the graph to show you where we are. And there's the white up at 255 and the black all the way down in the corner, bottom left corner. Let's turn that off. Now let's play around with this a little bit to see what happens. One guide to keep you as kind of a reminder of what's going on are these gradients on the bars on the left. As you can see, it goes from black up to white and black up to white, vertical and horizontal. If I take this, the blacks, and I push it up, what's going to happen is it's going to make all these darks brighter because I'm heading up into the bright here. Now the brightest pixels up in here will also get a little bit brighter, but not nearly as radical an effect as you will have in the darks. Let's click and drag that up, and you can see the darks are coming up brighter and brighter. Likewise here. Now I can't go up anymore here. All I can do is go down if I'm going to move vertically, and that will head them down into dark. So the brightest bars here on the right will become darker as I move this down, which is what's happening there. And again, the darks do get darker as well, but not nearly as quickly. Now what happens if I move left and right? Well, check this out. Let me take the darkest ones here, and I'm going to move it up right to that bar right there. So what you've seen there is the two bars now have become completely black. What this says is, and as I slide to the right here, everything to the left of this dot make it black. And if I move up to another one, then that one's turned black, and then the next one goes black, and the next one goes black. So everything over here in this volume, if you will, is to turn black. Likewise, if I slide this in, everything to the right of this dot, all those pixels and the representation in your image are to turn the brightest, which they have done. Good. That's a real good overview of what's going to happen in the levels the curves dialog box here. Now, if you want something other than a straight line, you can always come anywhere on here if you want and simply click once to drop a little adjustment point. And now from here, you can come down, you can come up, you can make it go higher to make the overall image brighter. You can go down to make the overall image darker. You could leave that up here. You could drop another one down here with a single click where I want to make the darks a lot darker and I want to make the lights a lot lighter. I'm really starting to increase the contrast in the image here a lot. If I want to get rid of a dot, simply click on it and drag it off the thing. Click on it and I'll run that one off the top and it's gone. What do you think is going to happen if I make a totally horizontal line? Let's take a look. I hit a neutral grayscale. No contrast whatsoever. What happens if I reverse the curve? Well, the blacks become white and the whites become black. Okay, that's pretty good actually for what we're going to do. I can make selective adjustments here too by clicking on the hand tool, and if I wanted to make just this guy a little bit what? Let me click and drag up. What's going to happen if I click and drag up? Is it going to become darker or brighter? And it becomes brighter. As you can see, what happened over here? I drag that point up, and when you go up from this region here, everything becomes brighter. If I take that again and click here to reset everything again, let's click here. If I pull it down, I'm going to make that darker. Okay, so the hand tool is pretty good. You can get selectively into different parts of your image to make the pixels brighter or make them darker. Okay, now one other quick thing here. You can also play around with color here. Let's get on only the red pixels. Now, if I come down here to the darkest of the dark reds and I move it up, look what happens. What I'm doing is I'm adding more red. I'm adding more red to the darkest pixels. And I'm adding more red because I'm coming above the diagonal line. If I come down here, I can't go up anymore. All I can do is pull down. If I pull down, I'm taking red out of the brightest pixels. And if you look at your standard color wheel, if you remove red, you're adding, in effect, kind of this greenish cyanish color when you remove red. Now what happens if I move over here horizontally to the right? The darkest pixels again, move them over here. What I'm doing is I am removing the red from the darkest pixels. And I know I'm removing red because I'm below the diagonal line. And that makes the complementary color that kind of greenish cyanish. Likewise, if I pull this one to the left, the curve will come above the diagonal line, so I'm adding more red, and there it is. That's coming in. So you know the color, whether you're adding it or subtracting it, by whether you are above the diagonal line or below the diagonal line. The same would be true, obviously, for green. If I take this and I move it to the right horizontally, I am removing green. And if you look at your color wheel, when you remove green, you're getting this kind of magenta purple. Look on your color wheel, the opposite color, opposite color, complementary color. Likewise, if I go up, I'm adding green, and there it is. Same thing here. If I take this on the green channel and slide it over, I'm adding green to the lightest, brightest colors, or I'm removing green from the brightest and adding that kind of purplish magenta to the brightest pixels. And clearly the same thing is true with the blue. Blue loves to be in the shadows. You find shadows in your images, they're going to be blues. If you want your shadows to be more bluish, go to the blue channel and add blue. How do I add blue? Pull it up, and we're adding blue. If you take away blue, move it to the right. And if you take away blue, the complementary color is that kind of yellowish. Same thing here in the brightest pixels. I am adding blue to the brightest pixels, or I'm taking it away and adding subtracting blue when I do this, which means I'm adding the opposite color, the complementary color, which is yellow, or kind of orange. Okay, that's a real good one on curves right there. That tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Let's go right to an image and try it out for real here. Here's a good image. It's a pretty good image. It could use a lot more contrast though, and that's one of the things curves is really good for, is ramping up contrast. So let's try a real simple adjustment here to add contrast. And what I might do is click there and strong contrast. That's a much better image. Now look what happened here. What happened was I took the darks and I made them darker, and I took the brights and I made them brighter a little bit. A nice classic S curve. You might be tempted to simply have no adjustment points in here and just kind of click and drag that off this way and click and drag this off this way. You will get a more contrasty image, but it's not that smooth. The fall off from the brights to the darks becomes quite sharp, and it could start looking quite garish. Now, if this is an effect you want, go for it. For example, ramp it over there and ramp it up over there. Okay, you could go real wild with the contrast here. If you like that, fine. As I say, go for it. Usually what you've got, though, is a nice little S curve. And again, this just gives it to you right away. What else you got going here? Color negative, darker. If you want to make the whole image a little bit darker, you can see what happened there. If you don't like it, not dark enough, click on it some more. Lighter is going to do the opposite and bring up like this from what we saw in the grayscale image we were looking at. Levels. Let's take a look at levels over here. Levels do exactly the same thing as curves do, except they don't have as many tools available. So if you're going to learn one of these, learn curves, because I'll repeat it again. Curves, you can do more with curves than you can with levels. If you think of it like a Venn diagram, everything you can do in curves, you can do in levels also. But you can do more in curves than you can do in levels. So it takes this tool really and expands it. If you want to be really quick and dirty and a tool, using a tool as a sledgehammer, try this one, brightness and contrast. But I can tell you right now that this one does exactly the same thing as a simple and basic adjustment in levels. It does the same thing. Here's a quick and dirty on levels. So you get an image like this. Here's the quick and dirty. Take the dark slider, run it up to just when you start seeing the curves start to come up. Take the brightest, it's already there, but you might want to bring it down right to where the curve comes up. This curve's coming up at about here. Take the midtones and drag them around, make the midtones brighter or make the midtones darker. So it does everything that curves does, but not as much. It does that. It'll do this kind of deal also where the entire image is getting brighter here as we did on the curves, where the entire image is getting darker. Okay. Again, you get little defaults here if you want. But for my money, I always use curves. Now let's get into color with curves. Let's take a look at that. Red. Now if you remember from the other image, the grayscale image, if I pull this red to the right, what is going to happen? Well, that's what's going to happen. You're taking red out of the darks. How do you know you're taking red out? Because you're below the diagonal line here. So what's the complementary color of red? It's that greenish, so your image is going to get greener. Likewise, throwing more red into the shadows, that's the way you do that. Likewise, pull the red out of the brights. You're going to get kind of more green in the brights, and you're going to get more red in the brights. The same is also true for the green and the blue. Let's go to the blue. Let's add some blue. What happens there? There we go. Well, it gets more blue. What can I say? Or it gets less blue, and what's going to be the complementary of blue is going to be that kind of orange, kind of yellow. So it's good to know the color wheel when you play around with your color gradients on this, and you can get all kind of neat sort of effects there. The blue up like that. What would happen if I did the green? Play around with the green, pull that out a little bit. You can play around with this literally for, I don't know, decades maybe, and really fun. And so you've got all these little classics, right? Little small adjustments, making little S curves or reverse S curves, or maybe bow down the center a little bit or bow it up a little bit. But don't be afraid to break all the rules. What would happen if you just did something nuts like this? Again, depends on what kind of effect you want to get. So don't be afraid to break the rules. Always do that. I encourage people in Photoshop to break the rules all the time. You see a lot of tutorials where they will say something like, well, increase contrast, make a better image, simply make a nice S-curve. Yeah. The S-curves are nice and stuff. Learn the theory, know what it is in the theory, and then go ahead and break it. Break the rules. There are consequences for breaking rules, but sometimes it's a really good effect and you like it. So that's about it for levels and curves. Again, if you're going to learn one of them, forget levels. Forget levels. Yeah, curves is better. You can do much more in curves than you can in levels. And the very last thing we're going to do is take a look at this little hand tool guy and see how that works with the colors and the rest of that. So click on the hand guy, and now you can come down into your image. Let's take the greens, right? You see the little circle thing happening up here? Okay, so we've got brighter pixels anyway. If I click and drag it up, it's going to make the grass greener, but it's going to make all the pixels of that kind of brightness brighter also. There we go. Now, let's say I wanted to make the barn a little bit darker. Just click there and bring that down. But you see, it's the brightness values. I'm not making, well, I am making the red darker, but I'm making all the pixels that have the equal luminance value come down also. So this is nice. This is a real handy little thing for very, very selective adjustments, at least in terms of color. But again, you can't really talk about color without talking about brightness also, if you know what I mean. Each color has a different brightness value attached to it. And that's what you're playing with in curves. You're playing with brightness values. That's about it, guys. Have a great time with that. Have fun. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.